Welcome to the Intersection Collective podcast. This is a space for parents, grandparents, aunties, uncles, anybody in the village who finds themselves advocating for the educational opportunities for an exceptional student at the intersection of race and disability. Thank you so much for coming back to join the Intersection Collective. As you may know, the Intersection Collective is an organization that exists to empower and encourage and support families advocating for their exceptional students, focusing and centering those families and students at the intersection of race and disability. Today, I'm joined in the studio by Daryl and Lori Woods, two exceptional families, a Cincinnati native and a Kentucky native, a Louisville, Kentucky. I gotta say that, Louisville, Kentucky native, but proud parents of two children. Your oldest, your son, Daryl Jr., DJ, for the sake of this conversation, is thriving and is accomplishing his goals and is leaning fully into his potential and his purpose, which is something to celebrate because he is on the early 20s end of an autism spectrum diagnosis. And so what we want to do is to kind of back you up in your journey of advocating and supporting a scholar on the autism spectrum. And kind of what has your journey been? What are some of the things that you know now that you wish someone would have told you 21 years ago? And what parenting hacks, what advocacy hacks would you give to families that are watching this now so that they can learn from, but also be encouraged by what I think is a success story in celebrating the differences of all of our children, but not diminishing their promise or potential. So help me get started. So your son, DJ, is 22?
Yes, he is 22.
He's 22 years old now.
Almost 23 in February. He'll be 23. He's a senior in college. He's over at NKU and will be graduating next Saturday with a bachelor's in geology. So
that's exciting. I want to pause.
Excited.
I want to pause. I don't want to rush through that. He is a senior at Northern Kentucky University, graduating in 7 days with a bachelor's degree in geology.
Yes.
Juxtapose that with receiving an autism spectrum diagnosis when he was 2, 3?
He was 3. We started working towards his diagnosis at 2.
Okay. When you were working towards that diagnosis, did you envision today?
No, I did. We did not. I did not. Maybe Daryl did, but
I'm laughing because when he was first diagnosed with autism, I took the approach that he would grow out of it. Just get him around normal kids, and basically just like what we would do. He would grow out of it. He would grow out of it. And that's the approach that I was telling her. And so she...
I see mom's lips turning up already.
Yeah. So,
keep talking.
Yeah. I mean, because we had Lauren. Yeah, do we have Lauren at the time? Yeah, Lauren. She was just born.
Because they're 16 months apart.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm just thinking they would grow up together and then he would grow out of the autism. Okay. Not thinking if she would have listened to me, then he would have been worse off than, the normal kid with autism.
So do I hear you
normal
saying you were wrong and mom was right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, she was. 100%.
Okay.
100%.
But yes, and then you double clicked on the normal, and I want to go back there and I want to live there for a second.
Yes.
We've had a conversation with Dr. Hill, who is a developmental psychologist with CPS, and she focuses primarily on early childhood and preschool in her work. But she made an excellent point in our interview, which is you have to define normal every time you use the word. So what's normal from your perspective, what's normal from the educator or the teacher's perspective, what's normal from building culture within the school, so that when you say that my child is not developing normally or my child is not achieving on a normal trajectory, that means different things in every situation. So when you talk about normal,
Right.
Define that for the sake of this conversation.
So normal to me is picking up like listening skills, or when someone claps, you look at them, or with with our daughter, all of them, both the kids been raised together. Then he would be when I say like a normal kid, like a kid who's gonna play, be active, interact with other kids, not be so focused on one thing. Kids with autism, I think they focus on one thing, like the spinning wheel,
Okay.
But he would get out of
more extreme versions.
More extreme, yeah. Get him into football, get him into some type of activity, so that he can be around kids and just pick up the kids' habits.
Okay.
Yeah, to me, that's what
that's what you felt was the course of action.
The course of action, and
this
put
was
him on the path of being normal.
This was before the diagnosis, or when you were seeking the diagnosis, that you were like, he just needs to be around more traditionally or typically developing children?
I'm trying to think. I think it was either after he was diagnosed, because I know Lori picked it up early. She picked it up like, hey, he's not responding. If she calls his name, he wouldn't respond.
I picked it up at 6 months.
Yeah.
Really?
I did.
Talk about that, Mom.
Okay, so when he was 6 months, I read a lot during my pregnancy, prior to my pregnancy, during my pregnancy. So I would read everything that related to developmental things when it relates to children. So when he was in his swing set, when I would come into the house, he would be in his swing, because sometimes Daryl would pick DJ up. And so I would come behind him and I'm like, DJ. I was always that type of mom. Hey. And he would just keep swinging and he would never respond. And so I would say, Daryl, he's not recognizing my voice, and is just something going on with his hearing? And he was like, oh no, he answers to me all the time. I'm like, well, call his name. And they'll go, DJ, and DJ will just continue to look straight forward. Then I clap really loud and he would turn. And he only responded to loud claps, but not our voices. And I started, I was just looking at every single thing because I had time.
Yeah.
And
this is your first baby.
Right, it's my first baby. So I thought that there was a hearing issue. So Daryl did not agree with it. So I took him while Daryl was, I don't know if I've ever told you that. So I took him to get his hearing tested, and they put him to sleep, and they tested his brain waves to see if he could hear. I did the most detailed hearing test, and yeah, babe, I did that, and I brought him home.
And what did they tell you?
They said that his hearing was fine. And so, that was 6 months, and then 9 months, and I'm still every time I pick him up, I didn't get that connection where he was looking into my eyes or anything like that. So I kind of had a feeling ahead of time that he was probably going to be on the spectrum, because he wasn't giving me the eye contact. And that I knew that was one of the first things that to look for. And so as we got
but this is early 2000s. So even then you had language and wherewithal to suspect spectrum disorder.
I did. And so I started talking to him about that. And of course, he thought I was a little crazy. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, we're going to let some more time go by. And by the time he turned 1, I started noticing more things. Not only was he not giving me eye contact, he wasn't saying mom or dad, or he wasn't doing things like reaching, a part of what I learned during that time is a part of communication is not just being able to verbalize what you want, you should be able to point to it.
Okay.
And that's a form of communication, even if you're just pointing to the bottle or the toy. He wasn't doing that. He would just go stand near it and just cry. But he never showed us what he wanted. And so from that point, I thought that there was going to be some speech problems. So I got him into speech therapy. Lauren was born by then, his first appointment. Lauren was 16. So he was 16 months when we started taking him to speech therapy.
Okay.
Because our daughter was just born.
Okay.
And they're 16 months apart. So he was 16 months. We started taking him to speech therapy just for him to do things like just touching, little pictures and touching things. And we took him to Children's Hospital. We waited on this list, thought that this renowned, this speech therapist from heaven was going to get us in, and she's going to show him all these techniques. And we waited because we wanted to be on this list. And remember when we got her in there, she wasn't. She wasn't real. She was like, she wasn't. She was very impatient. She was like, I don't know what to do with him.
Yeah.
So we waited months for this. I don't know what to do with him. And so.
Was this before? I think this was before.
No, we had Lauren with us.
No, I'm talking about before we got the diagnosis.
It was before we got the diagnosis, But we had already started in speech because we didn't want to wait till next year until they said he was old enough to get a diagnosis. Okay. You know what, Daryl? He was 2 when he got his diagnosis. Now I think so.
Okay. Yeah. So at 16 months, you were on the path of pursuing diagnosis, but you started with the speech.
Yes. We started with the speech
intervention. And you come across, which is not uncommon in the space, you come across a very culturally unresponsive physician or provider.
Oh, yeah. And everyone bragged about how great she was. She was very insensitive. She was very short patient. And once we left there, I don't know how we found this teacher.
Yeah. But see, I think what it is that when they give us like an attitude or, some type of, I guess, pushback, then they think that we're going to shut down and just take what they give us.
Correct. Passivity,
yes. And so she got the wrong ones,
100% the wrong ones. And so, but I want to stop and double click here because I feel like a lot of our families experience things that are very similar, and it does have a shutdown effect for most people. Yeah. You all are the exception to that.
I did leave out of there crying. I left crying hysterically because I was like, oh my God, my son's never going to be able to talk. He doesn't know how to say mommy. I don't know where to go now. Yeah. And I don't know how we found this other speech therapist, and she was in this little rinky-dink office. Seriously, it was like this little office, and that you would probably drive by and go, I'm not taking my kid there. And she was a part-time speech therapist. She was a teacher, or she worked during the day in the school system, and she just did it on the side. And I don't know how we found out about her. I just remember pulling up going, I took DJ in there, and she worked miracles on him. So remember, we got this flashy Children's Hospital, and now we got this little rinky-dink office. And when I went in there, I mean, this lady was amazing. I owe a lot of his growth through her. Like, just the technique she gave us was amazing.
So what I like about this particular story is not being deterred by cultural incompetence and by someone else's no. Yeah. It's like, as parents, we are our children's first and most powerful advocate. Right. And our job is to advocate for them, but also to teach them to advocate for themselves over time. And so we'll get to that in DJ's story. But at this point, you're now on speech therapist 2 or 3.
2.
And you still have a long road ahead of you because at this point, you've not landed on a diagnosis yet, but you've got intuition that this is what's going on with your child. And so there's a level of persistence involved in educational advocacy for our exceptional students. And sometimes we do break down into tears. Sometimes we do leave out of a place feeling defeated and feeling discouraged. I think that's part of the journey. but there's also the flip side of the coin, which is, but this is my child.
Right.
And we're talking about their future,
Right.
and we're talking about their potential and their promise.
Right.
And so I'm going to have to get over my feelings, and I'm going to have to keep knocking on doors
Yes.
and finding the next one. And so what I'm hoping our families will take away from your story today is discouragement is part of the journey, is part of the process, but it's not a brick wall that you cannot get around. You can't scale it. You can't get around it. You can't blast through it.
Right.
And part of that is building your community around you, like asking questions, talking to people, and building your village, building your tribe, and sharing information.
And don't don't judge a book by its cover too, because I thought children was the end all to be all, and it for him it wasn't. They do amazing things, but for his particular situation, it wasn't. This little rinky-dinky looking office with this amazing woman on the inside was very helpful. She taught us a lot of techniques, and she gave me a lot of hope. Hope that I didn't even have. Like, she saw a lot of potential in him before I saw it.
And actually, I was going to say the same thing, because like if we would have stayed at Children's Hospital and just went along with what they were giving us, then he would have probably been further delayed than what he is. And sometimes you can find miracles in small things instead of the big things, you know?
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Look for the miracles in the small things.
Yeah, in the small things.
Look for the wins in the small things.
Yeah.
I mean, but, you know, for the parents who are going through something like this, it's sometimes good to have two. You know, like if she would have listened to me, and, you know, just think where my son would have been. And on top of that, if she did not get out there and hit the pavement trying to find someone instead of taking what someone said, then, you know, look at where he would have been.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
Yeah.
So, like, there's a persistence.
Oh yeah, definitely.
There's like a no quit energy.
Yeah.
That I think any familial caregiver supporting an exceptional child has to bring to the party. I say it all the time. It's like you show up at the moment of advocacy, prepared to go hard in the paint, whether you need to or not. Whether you need to or not, that's how you show up.
Right.
And it is helpful to ally yourselves with a partner or with other family members or with other village members who can soften out your aggressiveness because you're talking about your child after all, but who can also, I think, listen for you when you're too emotional to listen. And so I think that's a wonderful role that a partner, if you are not partnered, that you can find a peer mentor to play that role for you, someone who is not as emotionally invested such that they can hear what you can't hear, but also so that they can encourage you when you feel frustrated and you're in tears or you want to quit or you are saying, like, I'm just going to give up or I'm, gonna be silent. I think that's what we can ill afford in the process is our apathy or our silence because we've been discouraged by someone along the journey.
Right.
So I will say that that would have been great for me, but it wasn't the case for me.
Okay. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
Okay, so I will say that Daryl, which he's already said, he had a whole different perception of what was going on. My mother-in-law, oh, he's a boy, the old black myth or whatever. I don't know. He's a boy. He's out. The boys are slower. They'll be fine. He'll pick up. My mom said the same thing. My sister. So everyone felt like I was just kind of like overreacting. So it was very lonely.
Okay.
Very lonely. But I will say that Daryl, one of the things, even though he didn't agree with what I was thinking was going on with DJ, he went with the program. So whatever I needed, he was there to support me, even though he thought I was crazy, probably going crazy, but he was there to support my crazy.
Okay.
So, if we had occupational, because we did occupational therapy too, and that was for the eye contact.
Okay.
So that he can give better eye contact. So we did occupational therapy and speech therapy.
Okay.
So Daryl was there for all the appointments and everything, even though it was nice to have his support, and I appreciate that. At the same time, it was still lonely because nobody agreed with what I was doing.
Right. But they supported you in your crazy, as you called it.
Definitely, they definitely supported me.
I love that.
And they recognized it later. And they also came back and said, you know what? I'm glad you did that.
So let's talk then about when you finally received the diagnosis. Did you feel any sense of relief? Like finally someone can validate what I've been feeling all of this time? Or were you more feeling fear and dread? Like, what does this mean for my son and his future?
So we took it two different ways. For me, it literally felt like a death. I felt like it really felt like a death, and I responded that way. I cried. I was on the floor. I went home, laid in bed, didn't come to work for like 2 days.
Despite the fact that you suspected this since he's 6 months old. Now we're 2. And
because I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to be wrong. Okay. And I still, even though I knew what I knew I wasn't a professional, and I wanted someone to tell me wrong. I wanted someone to tell me otherwise. So I knew it, but it still felt like, because when you get a diagnosis like that, it kind of feels like a death, because it's like all of the dreams that you have, they kind of go down the river until you rebuild new dreams. And that's what I did. So all the hopes that I had and all the things that I thought he would be doing according to the developmental, patterns or whatever, I knew that he wasn't going to do those. He wasn't going to say mom and dad on time, or if he was, I didn't think he was going to say it at all, because he was doing so much gibberish. He stimming and whatever. I don't even know he was doing a lot of gibberish.
Yeah, he was.
And he did that.
So he had vocal stems.
Definitely. Until he was around, we worked with therapists that we found until like one day it just clicked. Yep. And
she kicked us out, said he don't really come back no more.
Yeah, really? Yeah. She said he can move on to the next level. We had early intervention as well. So we were sending him to a school for children with autism. So we were doing anything that I heard someone else talk about. And one of the things I'll say is that you can't just stick. It's nice to stick with your own just to support each other, but you have to get out there outside of your own, because there's things that non-Blacks were doing that I thought you had to be rich to do these things. And it was just more so of finding out who to ask, where to get the money from, things like autism scholarships. Only reason why I knew that exists, it wasn't just from, it wasn't from one of us. It was from one of the white ladies that I met at speech therapy.
And that is a very common phenomenon, right? So when we talk about the informal networks that exist within the exceptional children community, or what I'm going to call like the learning differences or the disability community, so much of it is informal, but that's how information moves. And African American families often report not knowing about programs and services that exist because we have a much more difficult time accessing these informal networks. I mean, to be perfectly honest, that's what the Intersection Collective kind of exists to do, is to help create some formality to these informal networks so that information can move around within communities of color, within, non-English speaking communities more freely. and that we don't necessarily have to stumble in the dark across a random meeting, you know, in the doctor's office or in aisle 3 at Kroger,
Right.
to have access to the information we need in order to leverage all of the resources that are available to our kiddos.
There wasn't a Black network when we were, when our son was younger. We didn't know of any Black families. We were always the only Black family, Black son, Black anything. So we didn't know of a network. I'm glad that there's something now that you're doing that, because we really could have used that.
Most people can. Like most of us can. Most of us can. And so your story, your journey is really helpful and encouraging to a lot of me and a lot of other families, because access to information that is free flowing tends to just not make its way to marginalized communities of color, in the same way that it does into dominant culture communities. Also, diagnoses happen much later for Black families. I mean, you mentioned that your son got his diagnosis at 2. That's fantastic, particularly for a boy.
I did fight for that.
Who was Black. And it's because you pushed and you worked.
I pushed. I was I pushed very hard for that, because they wanted us to wait. They felt like he needed to develop some more skills, and if it was too soon to tell. And I'm like, well, if we don't get this diagnosis, we're not going to get these other services that are available. So I wanted him. I always felt like, you know, if he doesn't have it, then he doesn't have it.
So be it.
So be it. He doesn't have it. But I didn't want to wait a whole year and sit there watching the calendar for us to have access to certain services.
Yeah. The typical white male child receives an autism spectrum diagnosis at 24 months. That's average, too. The typical Black
on time.
male
Even though he
child
wasn't.
receives an autism diagnosis around the age of 5.
Wow.
They wanted us to wait until the end.
Think of all of the intervention that is missed between 24 months.
I didn't know that.
And
That's
5 years of age. And so that's part of why.
Because they really pushed back. They really pushed back. They did not want me to do it.
And so even with that, I'm hoping what families here that are watching this is keep pushing. Keep pushing, because the interventions are powerful and they work, but they work so much better if the child receives them sooner.
And it's a lot out there. I mean, it's a lot out there. And I guess the thing that really gets to me is the fact that you have somebody who's basically dictating, you know, the growth of your child.
That's right.
So if you let them dictate the growth of your child, then what are you showing your child? You know? I mean, you got to look at DJ. Like, I was listening to him last night, you know, going through a presentation that he has to do. Who would imagine? You know, he's going through a presentation, you know, talking on the phone. He's driving. You know, he started off at TSU. You know, he took it upon himself.
TSU, Tennessee State University.
Yeah,
I want to be careful to name all of the acronyms that
Tennessee
we throw.
State University.
He started out at Tennessee State University and then decided to transfer to Northern Kentucky.
Yes, just in that COVID.
Yes.
You know, just to be close. But who would imagine? You know?
I would have.
And that's just him, you know, taking the initiative and just being aggressive. You know, wanting to do things, you know, wanting to be independent. And he understands what he was diagnosed with, but the diagnosis does not mean that it's a permanent. I mean, it's just a title.
That's right.
You know?
That's right. And so talk about that. So again, in our conversation with Dr. Hill, we asked her at the end, same question I'm going to ask you guys at the end, we'll get there, which is like, give me a hack. So for moms, dads, aunties, uncles, grandmas, grandpas who are watching this on behalf of their exceptional student, tell me something you know now that you wish you would have known when your kiddos were 3, 5, 7. And the one thing that she said is not being so precious about talking about their disability or their difference with them so that they begin to understand how they learn and how they interact with the world around them so that they can become powerful self-advocates. That our job as their parent is to provide advocacy, but it's also to teach them how to become their own most powerful advocate. And we deny them some of that learning when we try to protect them from, their diagnosis, or we try to protect them from how they, process information and experience the world differently, atypically. And we're not really doing them any favors. So that was her hack. But I also hear you naming some of that, in that DJ is very aggressive and he is accomplishing a lot of things that people told you at some point in time he might never do.
Exactly.
And part of that is because of his self-determination and the work that you all have been able to do to teach him to be an effective self-advocate. Talk a little bit about like what that teaching him about his disability and teaching him how to be a self-advocate happened in your journey.
Oh, so DJ, trying to think, was he 16? DJ didn't know for a very long time. He had a feeling within that he was on the spectrum.
Okay.
And he would see little things, because I have a folder for each year since he was 3 years old, or 2, for each year of his development. So for every year, I have a folder with all of his documents, his milestones, everything inside of there. So he stumbled across it before, and finally he asked me, because I didn't know how we were going to tell him, because he was thriving. He's doing so much. He's doing all the typical things that kids do, and I never knew how to tell him. And Daryl wasn't going to tell him, because Daryl didn't even really speak of autism, really. And so DJ came to me on his 15th birthday and told me that he wanted to ask me a question, and I kind of knew what it was about. He told me he'd been seeing folders. Remember that? He started asking questions. And I said, well, why don't you just think about how you want to ask me, think about the questions that you want to ask me, and let's talk about it on your 16th birthday. Okay. And so he said, okay. And then on the 16th birthday, he said, remember that conversation? And I said, yeah. He said, I'm ready. And I said, okay. And so I had a conversation with him. When he asked me, you had already told me that he kind of knew it, so you weren't really, I just wanted to have a conversation with him, be open, and I just told him that, yes, you were diagnosed, and yes, but you've overcame. I just talked about the positive. I talked about where he was and how much he's overcome his diagnosis and how well he's thriving. And I just encouraged him at the same time. Okay. And so he did his own reading, because that's how DJ is. DJ's going to do his research. So he kind of knew. Okay. We just made it formal. And then after a while, he started telling everybody. I'm like, don't tell everybody, just be you. Like, but so he's pretty open about it. He actually keeps aesthetic. I don't know if are they twins, the kids that he babysits?
I'm not sure if they are or not, but both of them have autism.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yes, he keeps some children that has autism.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and he's just a leader. He does very well. So I'm just really proud of him.
As you should be.
I'm so proud of him.
As you should be. As you should be. So,
but let me tell you what one thing I wanted to mention is when he was in preschool, we did send him to 2 different schools. We sent him to a school for children with autism. It's called ABS. I don't know if I think they're still around. Okay. Applied Behavioral Services. So we sent him there. He did a half day there, and then he did the other half day at a typical preschool, because we wanted him to get all the training, the whatever they offered at Applied Behavioral Services that was geared towards children with autism, through that autism scholarship that I found out through other people. So we didn't have to pay anything for that private program at the Applied Behavioral Services, because at the time we found out that you could put your what is it, your dollars, your funding that's allocated towards your child as a student,
Yes.
that you could do a waiver from them going to a regular school and send it over to Applied Behavioral Services.
Yes.
So that's what we did. And he did 2 schools
Okay.
for 2 years. And then right after that, because we felt like he needed both. We didn't want him around children all with autism, because we felt like he still needed to be inclusive as well.
Correct.
And after that, he was inclusive from that point forward.
And
like
that
from
was kindergarten
Yep.
to 12th grade. He did
Yep.
general education.
Yes.
School settings.
He did an IEP
Yes.
we did an IEP as long as they would let me, because he really did so well that we were running out of skill, like things that we needed to have him work on.
Okay.
And I kind of felt like I was holding on to it for a security blanket just
Yeah.
because I didn't want to let it go. And then they moved him to a 504.
Okay.
And
At what point did he transition from the individual education program to the 504?
so that was in the 10th grade.
Okay.
10th grade. But really, he could have gotten off of the IEP into the 504 before
Probably
that.
sooner.
Yeah, but it was really me just holding on to it because I felt like,
Well, he was being successful. So,
Yeah.
like, why mess up the recipe?
yeah. Also, I felt like, why mess up the recipe? Give him, he's entitled to have this. And
Give him everything. that he's
yeah, but we
entitled
couldn't
to.
come up with any goals. Like, so, and every
Well, he
year
kept
I'm like,
outperforming the goals.
every year, after a while, I'm like, you know what? Okay, he just needs extra time, and that's why he ended up on the 504,
Okay.
which he has in college as well.
Well, that's good to know that the 504 followed him
It
to
followed him,
his post-secondary choice. And I also think it's encouraging, and it might be new information for families to know too, is that your child, even when they're diagnosed with a disability and they have an IEP, they can progress beyond the IEP. So it's not necessarily a label and a death sentence for the potentiality of their academic life.
Right.
That if the IEP is done well, and if the goals are done well, that the child and the interventions are appropriate, the tiered interventions are appropriate, the child should grow beyond the need for the IEP and maybe transitions to a 504, maybe transitions to nothing. But the goal isn't to see the IEP as a limiting document that puts boundaries on your child's potential and doesn't allow them to grow beyond their disability.
And they took speech off because he didn't need speech therapy anymore. And then they took occupational therapy off. He didn't need that anymore. And after a while, we just had an empty document. So I'm like, okay, I surrender. We can move on.
We can let it go.
We can let it go.
Definitely let it go.
And it was a good choice.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yes. It sounds like you all and DJ worked the system.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And that's the way that it should be.
Yeah.
That's the way it should be for all children. Yeah. And a big part of the working the system is your tenacity and your determination and your willingness to get information and to get resources from anywhere that you could find them.
Yeah. Don't wait till 5. Don't wait till 5.
Don't wait until 5.
You'll be behind the 8 ball then. Way behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
Now you're trying to catch up, and by that time it's just too late.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So keep pushing. Earlier the better.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so much like Lori mentioned, there's so much money out there. I remember there was a man who bought DJ a bike, and I'm thinking like, why does he need a bike? I mean, we could afford to get a bike, And
somebody put him on the list.
Yeah.
We like, no, we don't need it. It's good. He was like, no, take this bike.
And a piano. He had a piano that was like really expensive. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he utilized it.
Somehow his name was on the list.
Get on the list for these resources.
Oh man, I'm
Kings Island passes.
So say yes to the resources.
Oh, yes, you got to.
Is what I
Some people just want to give it to you. I'm like, no, we can. We're okay.
Yeah.
But they just really wanted to help a family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I
And just
remember
being a black family too. Like I said, if Lori would have listened to me and my mother, then DJ would have been further than where he is right now.
Right.
But as a black family, we have to take advantage of providing a better life for our kids. And also it takes the stress off of you too. It's just that you have to put that leg work in to get those resources.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just got to take a handful of darts and just throw it at the board. And something's going to land and stick.
Okay.
You don't know where it's going to stick, but it's going to stick.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to do the leg work before or after. So you may as well do it beforehand. Because if you don't do it beforehand, in the end, you're going to still have to do a lot as they get older.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, that's a big. Let's talk a little bit about that, and then I'll kind of land the whole jet on this conversation. But the transition, people always talk about the steep cliff between high school and post-secondary, particularly for exceptional children, and there seems to just be this cliff of resources and support, and most of our kids just kind of fall off and their transition is not smooth. They don't realize the kind of success that DJ has realized. What do you think made the big difference for your son in his transition from secondary to post-secondary?
I would say the most important thing you could do for your children who's on the spectrum or have any type of disabilities is to get in touch with the school. Most schools, pretty much all schools, should have a disability office, whether it's called, some of them is called disability services. It's some type of office that supports children or young adults with whatever their needs are. So what we did was we went into the office and made contact with them. And, he took his 504 over there and they offer whatever support is needed, whether it's tutoring or extra time on the test. In his case, it was extra time on the test. And I think he took advantage of some tutoring, but he's so darn smart that
This was at Tennessee State University.
Actually, it was at Tennessee State and Northern Kentucky University because I did the same thing when we went over to Northern Kentucky University. At Tennessee State, they had, and he didn't need all these services, but for those who are on medication or need to talk to a psychologist, they had those type of people on board, people who would even administer tests, medicine.
Okay.
They had someone, but that wasn't the case for DJ. He didn't need any, but I'm just saying that for children who need that, they're available to do that. At NKU, we just really used the 504 extra time on the test, but you do have to talk to them immediately as soon as your kid gets accepted and gets on campus.
Yeah. Now, when DJ was looking for colleges to apply to, did you all consider schools that had a reputation for supporting exceptional students, or did you not consider that at all? Because there are some universities that specifically have, transition programs that are aimed at supporting children on the spectrum or children with learning differences, children with exceptional needs. Did you consider any of those, or was that not a part of your decision matrix at all?
It was a small consideration, but no.
Okay.
What we considered is who was going to provide the most money.
Yep, the most financial aid.
And then once we determined who was going to give us the most money, then we would go into and find out whether they had those services. But we weren't led by that was a factor once we found out how much scholarships he would get.
Okay. Yeah, but
But had they not offered it, we wouldn't have been interested in the school.
Right, right. Even despite the money.
Right.
So that was like a necessary equation. I was going to say, because Tennessee State is one of a few HBCUs that actually does, have disability services office on campus and does have resources.
Yeah, they do a lot. Yeah, I was
At
really,
TSU.
yes,
They-
I was
they
really
do an awful
impressed.
lot. They really do.
Mm-hmm.
They really do.
And NKU, Northern Kentucky University, they don't do as much as Tennessee State, but
Okay. But
they do offer services.
It's obviously working for him because we graduate in 7 days.
Yeah.
yes. Yep.
I love it. Okay. So the last question that I always ask in these conversations is, you are now kind of on the young adult end of your journey. And you've seen a lot, you've experienced a lot. What would you tell a family who's on the very early stages of a similar journey? Give us your best mom hack.
Oh, I was going to give it to Dad.
Well, you can have yours. You can have your own hacks because you've had your
I
own
gotta think about
experiences
it.
and you've evolved differently, separately and together in the journey to support DJ. So you think about yours.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with Lori.
Okay.
Best mom hack.
Okay. Oh, that's a good question. I would just say, trust your instinct. Trust your gut as a mom. I did that. No, come back to me. That's a good. I don't know.
But that's a good one, though. Trust your gut.
Trust your gut. And be optimistic. I lacked that when I was doing it. I was just going through the motion. I'm just doing what I thought should be done, but I didn't have much hope. I really didn't. So I say be hopeful. You just never know what can happen. So in looking back, I would say that I should have had more of a positive, optimistic look. I was just going through the motions. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. If I pulled out, I have this little sheet of paper that only had 3 things that I wanted him to do. I wanted him to say mommy, I wanted him to say daddy, and I wanted him to say hungry. No, it was 4 things. Hungry and I don't feel well. That's all I thought that I had to look forward to. So just know that, beyond your imagination, great things can happen. And you just never know. Just stay optimistic and stay prayed up.
Stay hopeful, stay prayed up, trust your gut.
Trust your gut.
Great mom hacks. Okay, Dad.
Well, me, be faithful. Have faith that things are going to work out. Like with me, just involve your kids in normacy, meaning like basketball. Be patient, or some type of interaction with other kids. That is a good question.
I know it's a good question.
I mean, if you see a problem, don't be scared to address it.
Or too prideful.
Or too prideful. And I think that's what it is. If you know that your kid is not doing things that look, I guess, normal,
Typically developing.
Develop, address it. Address it. And let the pride go, nip it in the bud to the best of your ability. God put us all on here for a reason. And that kid might just be a special type of person. And so, if it's for that child to be autistic, fully blown, then live with it. But fight for it first. Fight to see what's out there that you can take advantage of, that you can help your child, help your family. And you never know. It's just probably something just not connecting, and they just need that connector. And you might be that advocacy to make that connection happen.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I love it. I love it. So keep fighting.
Yeah.
Don't give up.
Don't give up. No.
Stay faithful.
Yeah.
Stay prayed up.
Yeah.
Stay optimistic and hopeful. Find hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I'm hearing as the hack from the Woods family.
And don't be so private where some people are so private where they don't welcome help. You can't get help being closed up.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's like really big in our community where people are, keep my business in the house. We're going to keep this in the house. Nobody's going to know about it. And we were never like that. We shared it. Because if you don't share, nobody's going to be able to help you. People find out information along the way and may be willing to share it with you if you share it with them.
Yes.
Because otherwise people are going to walk on eggshells and ignore the problem.
I love what you are saying, and I think that that's a whole other conversation that we could have about how within the Black community we think about disability. And a disability doesn't mean the end of a future.
No.
Doesn't mean the end of possibility. It means rebuilding our dreams. Rebuilding new expectations.
That's exactly right. That's what we did. Yeah.
And I love that theme, and I love that lesson from you all. So thank you for taking some time to share. And congratulations to you all, and congratulations to
Thank
DJ. I'm sorry he wasn't able to join us in the studio today, but I get it. We have to get that project finished so that we graduate on time.
Yes.
And he is going.
This is going to be his first
conquer
real
the
graduation.
Really?
We missed COVID. COVID. Yes.
Because he graduated during COVID season.
Yeah.
So how exciting is that for everyone?
Yeah, it's exciting.
How exciting is that for everyone? I love that.
Yeah.
I love that for him. I love that you've helped him rebuild new dreams.
Oh, yeah.
That have surpassed even what you thought was possible in your version round one.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, appreciate that.
I love it. I love it. Thank you guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And thank you for taking some time to join us in the studio for this particular conversation with the Woods family. The Intersection Collective podcast is excited to bring you nuggets of hope, nuggets of joy and inspiration on what can oftentimes feel like a long, lonely journey of special education advocacy. Come back next time for more hope for your journey.